Controversial from the first moment it was announced that it was going to be done, the very inception of the concept, for a variety of reasons. Brilliant, psychopathic, psychotic, pathological, genius. 2019, The Joker. It's hard to imagine at this point anybody in that role for that movie except Joaquin Phoenix. Of course, he's an amazing actor. If you've seen his stuff all the way back to Commodus in Gladiator, the guy was able to pull off being Johnny Cash, both when he was healthy and when he was a wreck in the course of that biopic, and so many other things. Joaquin Phoenix is an amazing actor, but talk about tough. To step into an iconic role made famous or infamous by Cesar Romero way back in the 60s, having all of these great people having played it, Jack Nicholson, Heath Ledger's amazing job, to step into the role of the autobiographical movie, the origin story of the Joker. Joaquin Phoenix is an incredible actor. How could you not go with him when he's available? But still, what shoes to fill, what a cultural icon to be portraying. Yes, the Joker movie was controversial, just the idea, because, well, in the Batman comic books and throughout, it was originally, the whole idea was you didn't know the Joker's origin. You didn't know who he was. There were various times that we thought we knew, and it turned out that we didn't. And in fact, by modern times, so to speak, it was known in the Batman comic book universe that there were at least 3 Jokers operating simultaneously. The idea of giving him an origin story, well, going back to 1989 with Jack Nicholson and the way they redid Batman's origin for that movie. A lot of us loved that movie at the time because, well, we were getting a real live action Batman that was semi-serious, which we had never had before. But really, if you look at that script, it's a terrible, terrible butchery of the story that we don't get fully repaired until Batman Begins. So the idea of giving an origin story to the Joker, at least one Joker, a Joker in whatever universe this happens to be, was controversial from the beginning. And yet, how could you not? There's an incredible finesse that they use. There's a couple different times we saw this somewhat in the series Titans and elsewhere. DC sort of moving into this obscure non-time period. We get references back to the classical era for Batman's parents, for the Waynes to be at the theater watching a black and white film, watching an old what appears to be a silent film with moving with no dialogue. All of that feels like it was a long time ago. Clearly, in the context of this story, they're doing it because, I don't know, it's cool, because it's retro. But throughout the Joker, we get architecture, vehicles, we get all sorts of things that the ambiance feels like it's every time. It feels like it's now, but it feels like it's the past. And this is a beautiful way to finesse the feeling of classic comic book universe back to the 40s, all the way up to the present. Within the confines of the story, we get so much about the Joker, his mental illness, his problems, his family issues, his mother's pathology. We get his imagining good things happening to himself, only to come around to the grim reality that it is not good things that are happening. And we see this man's rejection by society, can't get his meds, can't get the help that he needs, the pathology of his mother, the abuse of his childhood, the way, and he himself being able to summarize it. Why is everybody so rude? Why does everybody have to be so mean? Why is everybody rejecting him? And how finally, ultimately, he lashes out. It is a unique way to give us a sympathetic, dark character. And it, above all, it's a beautiful example of how you can tell a story and still get your ideas across. I want to clarify that because today everything's about ideology. The woke ideology being inserted, the ridiculous little check boxes. You got to have this, you got to have that. You can't have this, you can't have that. You've got to have this broad diversity, and it ends up so that the message has completely replaced the medium. Now, it is true, art, especially fiction like this, when you're talking about comic books, when you're talking about movies, TV, these things always carried an ideology. Of course they do, because you as an artist have an idea you're wanting to convey about the human condition. There's a point you're trying to get across. And so you use this medium to get that point across. The problem with the wokeness today is that it checks all of the boxes and it replaces the message. The medium becomes the message. There is no art anymore. There's random people in cool cosplay looking at the screen, yelling at you about how dare you vote for that candidate for dog catcher in Biloxi, Mississippi, you hateful bigot. It's stupid, it's trite, and it's meaningless. But real art will convey ideas, and the Joker conveys these ideas, and it really conveys, well, there's some relatively liberal ideas that are being conveyed by the movie The Joker, but it's done so well that it's still good. Because obviously they're trying to make a point about untreatable mental health. He's cut off because the government's downsizing. He can't get the help that he needs. Of course, I'm sitting here thinking, why the heck is this society's problem? When did this become everybody else's problem and not his own? When is this not the problem of his family, his community, his support group? But no, it's supposed to be paid for by all of our taxes. Nevertheless, you don't care about that. It's not something that makes you turn it off the way the cringeworthy things that are in Bucky and Bird, the Pigeon and the Snowman, and this other stuff, Supergirl, Ally McBeal yelling at you about your politics, and I turned it off and never turned it back on. Joker has this in there, like this is inserted. We should be deeply concerned that his funding was cut off for his meds. Doesn't matter. The genius of the story is that you empathize with him. It allows you to see the world through the eyes of this mentally ill man and feel that anguish. And you do empathize with him. And you do enjoy it when he finally gets revenge against the people that belittled him, which has a whole lot to say about the inherent pathology in all human beings, though, doesn't it? In fact, I have a couple theories of my own that I would like to address. One, there's this remarkable thing that happened culturally when the Waynes, after this movie debuted, people said, oh man, they took the Waynes from being charitable philanthropist liberals and made them conservatives. Well, I didn't see that. Now, this is a perfect example of how really good, well-done art will allow you to reach some of your own conclusions about the questions that it raises. There were people that were like, well, his parents, the Waynes were traditionally, Batman's parents were traditionally liberals. You made them conservatives. And I've watched the movie a number of times. I've never seen rich white liberals depicted so clearly as in the movie The Joker. They're arrogant and cocky. They think the whole world should live like them. They're fighting for you, the little guy, because they're sure that if you can just get the right education, get the right job, get in the right place, you'll go to the theater, the highbrow theater, just like them and do things exactly like them. And you too will be a classy white liberal because you want to be like them. That's the whole idea of liberalism in America. We know what's best for you and we will raise you up to our standard. They even talk about it when he's running for mayor and announces his candidacy. Thomas Wayne says, we're going to help people. We're going to lift people out of poverty. Those are leftist communist talking points. He doesn't say, we're going to create jobs. We're going to get the economy going. We're going to teach you how to be part of this economy so you can provide for yourself. No, he's talking about government programs. And the fact that those rampaging, sex-offending scum on the train that are killed by the Joker, they work for his company, like all crazed rich white liberals. They can't imagine that the people on their side would ever behave like that. Oh, no. They were good boys. They were good young men. They wouldn't do that. That guy that had 15 felonies and fought the cops and got killed, that was only because of racism and the cops were against him. It couldn't be that he did anything wrong. Everything about the Waynes in this movie is an honest depiction of classical liberalism. Even if the creators and writers intended to suddenly make the Waynes conservative, they didn't. They failed. Everything they say about lifting people out of poverty, everything indicates these are the Waynes. but it's the first time we got an honest look at the Wayans, not as idealized people that give to charity and are so nice, but how actual rich white liberals behave. It was really fascinating stuff. My other personal theory, the more I've watched this movie, there is this crybaby sort of thing, right? Where you're supposed to empathize with the sick guy, and that somehow justifies what he does. And I do enjoy that. I mean, it's great when he whips out the gun and shoots De Niro, and I'm laughing about it, which again, this is good art because it makes me confront and face and live with my own pathology. I shared that GIF 1,000 times. Is that really appropriate? Should we be? But somehow in the vicarious release of the movie, it's okay for us to be pathological because it's just a movie and the Joker is acting it out for us. But actually, the more I watch it, the more I think the whole sob story about what it is that leads to the Joker isn't necessarily true. We see that he has these fantasies about being a good comedian, about being a good son, about the girl down the hallway, the woman down the hall is apparently in love with him, and he's charismatic, and he's got, and we assume as we watch it, you watch it once or twice, these are his fantasies that are shattered by the grim meat hook realities of life. Or is the Joker just psychotic because he's psychotic? More like the Heath Ledger version that talks about just rejecting the norms of society. Is the real Joker actually funny and charismatic and dating the girl down the hall? Are the negative things about him the things that he's actually imagining? He tells us at the beginning when meeting with the therapist, all I have are negative thoughts. And yet when we see him, what we think is him being delusional, they're all positive thoughts. Or we've got it backwards, and his illness is making him imagine his mistreatment, his oppression, making him imagine his bad circumstances. I think I'm on to something there. Probably not what the writers intended, but I think the more you look at it, if all he has is negative thoughts, if that's true, why then do we see that all he has is positive, uplifting, heroic delusions about himself? Because maybe we've got the wrong delusions. I better stop or I'm going to ramble on forever. Joaquin Phoenix, amazing actor. Everybody in this does a good job. Everything about the story is brilliantly done. And like I said, it's an example of the really good movies that were made in an earlier era, most of which carried some sort of leftist sort of message, but were good stories and were well told and were thought-provoking rather than thought-stifling. The woke stuff with Ally McBeal screaming at the screen about what you ought to believe and who you should vote for Dogcatcher in Biloxi, Mississippi, that makes everything so trite and so small, and it is not thought-provoking. It basically says, if you don't already agree with me, then get the hell out. That's not something that is thought-provoking. The classic movies were all left-leaning in their ideology, in the things they focused on and how they presented them, but they presented them so well that they weren't forcing an idea down you where you couldn't even stomach watching it unless you already agreed. Rather, it gave you something thought-provoking in characters you could empathize with. And the Joker is incredible in that regard. It pulls you in, it gives you this insight into this world, and you come away with a much stronger empathy for him and his rejection of the plague of modernity.